Hi there and welcome to this episode of Beyond the Photo with me, Damien Jackson. In this video I'm at Ballinageeragh Dolmen near Dunhill in County Waterford. In fact, I'm only a few kilometres from the Copper Coast. I'm going to take a brief look at the history of this dolmen and dolmens in general, and then I'm going to get to work looking at some compositions for taking good photographs of this. So thank you for joining me along the journey and let's get going. So here's a look at the dolmen on the map. As you can see, it's quite close to the village of Dunhill, and further down towards the sea you have Dunhill Castle, and finally then on the Copper Coast you have Brownstown. So it's quite close to the Copper Coast and to the village of Dunhill. But it is kind of lost in the middle of nowhere, so the easiest way to get it is just to put Ballinageeragh Dolmen into Google Maps and it'll take you straight there. This dolmen is quite small in terms of height and stature, and as we'll see later, it's not in the best state of repair. But what to me makes this dolmen special is that it stands in the middle of a large field, enabling us photographers to get within 360 degrees around it to take photographs from all angles. Now there are another couple of dolmens within 5 kilometres of here, which are larger and in much better condition. Particularly this one here at Brownstown, which is a really fine specimen. It's much larger in size and is in much better condition. However, as you can see, it's located in the middle of a small copse of trees and sceoch. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, it's the Irish word for a mix of hedges and bushes, etc. And from a photography point of view, it's a pity as it makes a great subject, but it's almost impossible to isolate it from the surrounding sceoch and really make it stand out. There is, however, as you've probably seen already, an issue with Ballinageeragh Dolmen, in that it was repaired / reconstructed in 1940, and to be honest, it's not a good job. It looks like concrete casing or shuttering was used, with little thought for the aesthetic effect that might have on the dolmen. However, I imagine in the tough times of 1940, in the middle of World War II, that the budget for repair of a dolmen was quite small. My solution is to try to take some photos from angles that will hide this, but if it does come into the frame, then I'll have to use the clone tool and replace the concrete with an area clone from one of the other stones, as it just wouldn't look right, and I couldn't just leave it in the image. Although I've said that this dolmen is quite small compared to others, the capstone alone is 4 metres by 2.6 metres and has been computed to weigh a massive 6 3/4 tons. So small in comparison to others, but still fairly hefty in my book. Now the term dolmen comes from the Breton language and directly translates to stone table. Now it's thought dolmens, correctly known as portal tombs, mark burial and ceremonial places, and investigations in the 1930s at Ballinageeragh reveals evidence of cremated bone, flint and charcoal. These giant stones were quarried and shaped, and it's believed that the grooves which were shaped into the top of the capstones were used as a means to let the blood from sacrifices by Druids drain away. One of the best known dolmens in Ireland is this one at Poolnabrone in the Burn. I took this shot in 2015 and it's at sunrise. So I got up around 4 AM and it was the middle of the summer, hoping to get a nice colourful sunrise. I was trying to get the iconic shot of a sunstar through the supporting stones. But unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately depending on your taste, you can see there was a lot of mist and fog around. And although I didn't get any colour in it, it did provide some nice atmosphere to the image. Now there is a rope that encircles the dolmen to keep visitors around 10 metres away, so it can interfere with your shot, but if you position your camera under the rope and use a wide angle lens from low, looking up at it, you can still get a nice shot. Be warned though, under non-COVID or what we might call normal conditions, there are busloads of visitors arriving all day, so best to shoot early morning or late evening and you'll have the place to yourself. Situated about 2 miles east of Carlow is Brownstown Dalman, the largest dolmen in Ireland. These pictures have been taken from the roaringwaterjournal.com, and I'll leave a link in the description below. The capstone on this one is estimated to weigh a massive 160 tonnes, so it puts Ballingeeragh in the mini dolmen category. It's fascinating to think about how these were constructed 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, and this illustration provides some insight into how it may have been done, because it's not actually known yet. By initially using a huge mound of earth to enable the capstone to be hauled to the required height for the supporting stones, and then the earth was taken away. So what I hope to do here today is take some shots at sunset and then hang on for an hour or so until night falls. There's a half moon expected, the skies are supposed to be clear, so I'd like to be able to get some stars in the photograph behind the dolmen as well. So we'll see how that goes. Now, although the dolmen is isolated out in the field, one of the problems with it is actual background itself, because you don't have any majestic mountains behind it. All there are some trees, there's some houses, and as you can hear across the road from me there's a milking parlour, and you can hear the cattle giving out from time to time there. So one of the best ways of getting that separation is by getting low. Now again, I know I'm harping on about separation, I said it in my last video as well, but you don't want the dolmen with a background of trees or a background of woods behind it. It doesn't stand out enough. You need that separation, and one of the two ways that I am going to try to get that today is, one, by actually using a long lens and blurring the background, and two, by getting as low as possible and just having the sky, pointing the camera up towards the dolmen and just using the sky as the background and trying to exclude as much of the surrounding landscape as possible. So we'll get on that and see how we go. So what I'm going to try and do now is use a high aperture of f16 to try and create a little sunburst as it comes through underneath the legs of the cap of the dolmen here. And I am going to bracket it because this side of the dolmen is obviously in the shade, and I'll need to bring out some light on that. So I'll use 3-shot bracketing with maybe 2 stops in between each one. So here it is, a disaster no less. I felt I had to show it to you anyway after my prelude and lead into it. It's so obvious now, but when I was looking through the viewfinder, I didn't give enough thought to that barn. I was concentrating on getting my sunstar right and the 3-shot bracketing. A fatal mistake. The composition was never there to start with. The barn is in the shot, and even worse, the entire mass concrete supporting leg is prominent in the photo. After I telling myself earlier I need to avoid that at all costs. This was a major cock-up. Time to move on. At least there's a lesson learned, that the sunstar is a sunrise shot, because there's nothing in the other direction that's going to interfere with it. So at this stage the sun has just gone down and there's a nice little pink hue starting to appear in the sky. Now I'm getting down as low as possible, a foot or 30 centimetres, whichever measurement you use, off the ground, and I'm focusing on the cap of the dolmen. I'm at a 40th of a second at f8. I don't really need any more than f8 because there's nothing in the background that I want to keep focused. Now the advantage, as I said earlier, of getting really low like this is that my background is now the sky. So the dolmen is standing out against the sky, rather than if I was at head height, well then it would merge into the trees in the background there. So I will show you an example later on, the difference between being low and just standing up, and I'll take a few shots and demonstrate that now. So I'm going to take the same photograph now at eye level, and I'll show you later on in the video the difference in the separation between this shot and getting lower and taking the other one. This is the first image taken from low down. I think it makes the dolmen very dominant in the photograph, which is exactly what you want. You can see that the trees and the ditch in the background are down around the legs of the dolmen, because I'm shooting up and you can see more of the skies and hardly any of the field. I've cloned the left supporting leg consisting of the mass concrete using the source from the leg on the other side. Now in the second image taken from head height, you can see that the dolmen is not as dominant. Now obviously I didn't go to all the trouble of cloning out the mass concrete on this one, but just use it as an example, and you can see that the trees, the ditches and even the field itself is actually much more overbearing in this photograph than it was in the first one. So here's a side-by-side comparison and you can decide for yourself. Okay, the second way that I spoke about getting separation was using the long lens. So I'm going to combine the telephoto lens. I'm going to use a 70-200. I'm going to actually combine that with getting low, and let's see how that goes. So for this shot I want to get super low, so I've dispensed of the tripod. I'm using the 70-200. Now I will bring it down to 2.8. So that will allow me to bring up my shutter speed that little bit more, and I will have to increase the ISO because obviously it's getting darker now. But I've got one of those tripods with the center column, and the center column keeps it about a foot off the ground. So I want to get even lower, just along the tips of the grass, and see how I go from there. So I'm going to shoot at 2.8 and try and blur out the background, and in addition to that then use the low height in order to try and isolate the dolmen. Okay, so those are not too bad. What I've ended up with is a kind of a blurry foreground of the green grass, and then the dolmen in the background with just the sky behind it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try it from the other side and shoot into where the sun set. It's much brighter over there in the west, so I'm going to go on the opposite side now. So there's some fabulous colour coming in the sky now. We're facing due west and the sky is really lighting up behind the dolmen. What I'm going to do now is again get low with the telephoto lens and shoot up at the dolmen. Because the sky is so bright and this side of the dolmen is so dark, I'm going to have to bracket the images. So I'm going to use again 3 bracketed images with 2 stops in between each one. Now the purists will probably tell you that I really should have a tripod for bracketing, but I do find that if you use the high-speed shooting mode on your camera, those 3 frames will be gone off in less than half a second. So there's very little movement in between them. And I've never had a problem with Lightroom photo merging them into a HDR image. So let's get it down and get a few shots here. So what I'll do with those bracketed images is I'll put them into Lightroom and I'll highlight the 3 of them and go Edit Photo Merge HDR. Now don't be frightened if you've not used that before, don't be frightened of the HDR tag. It's not like the old HDR that were radioactive type photographs. All you're doing is enabling the software to get the high dynamic range between the highlights and the shadows, which the camera can't pick up. Our eyes can do it, but the camera can't. But if you put them into Lightroom, highlight the three of them, it'll give you a nice image in which you'll get all three of the shadows, the midtones and the highlights. At this stage, although you don't see it on the camera, it's starting to get quite dark and I've lost a lot of the colour from the sky. What I'm going to do now is take a break for an hour or so, just sit in the car and get a coffee and come back when it's dark. There's supposed to be a half moon tonight, so I'd like to capture that, lighting up the dolmen here with some stars in the background. Now, I'm not an astrophotographer, so I won't be looking for a Milky Way or cores or anything like that. But I would like a nice atmospheric shot of a moonlit dolmen with some stars behind it. So let's give it a go and see what happens. So as you can see, it's getting quite dark now. There will be a half moon or so out tonight, so there's going to be a lot of ambient light around. What I'm using is a wide angle lens, a 10 to 20mm. And I'm getting as close as I can to the actual dolmen. This isn't a very big dolmen, but the wide angle lens should accentuate it, and just the closer I can get, the bigger the dolmen is going to look in the frame. It's a good clear night and hopefully the stars will come out behind the dolmen and I'll get a nice photograph from there. Now, I don't know a lot about astrophotography. It's certainly not my forte. It's something that I haven't really got into. So just from a little bit of what I was reading, etc., it would seem like maybe 10 seconds is the maximum I can go before there's movement in the stars. So I would hope to keep it maybe around 6 to 8 seconds, and I'll bump up the ISO. If the photo is too noisy afterwards, well then look, I'll use some noise reduction in post-processing to calm it down a little bit. So here it is. Certainly not a banger, but I do like it. I think the night sky gives a good contrast to the lighter colours of the stone on the dolmen, and it really becomes dominant in the photograph. The stars are not as bright as I would like, but I might have been just a little bit early for this one. What I do like is that little wispy cloud above the right hand side of the dolmen and the way the moonlight has it lit up. So what I've decided to do now is to actually go a little bit lower again, just to change the composition a little bit. So the camera is actually pointing up at the dolmen at this stage. And once again, anytime you point the camera up, it's like shooting athletes in sport, etc. It just makes them appear bigger and more powerful, and that's what I'm hoping to do with the dolmen itself. It also, of course, gives the added advantage of being able to take in a lot of sky behind it. Now, it's gone so dark I've had to use a little video light, and I'm going to have to turn that off now while I take a few shots. My last shot of the evening, and that wispy cloud from the last shot is still hanging around. It's been joined by a couple more on the left hand side, and the colours on those are from the light pollution from Waterford City. And as far as I'm aware, that little constellation just over to the right tip of the capstone is Orion, but I'm certainly open to correction on that. It's not my forte at all. So that's it from me at Ballingeeragh Dolmen. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please leave a like or a comment below. If you'd like to subscribe, you'll be notified of my next episode. So once again, thank you for joining me along the journey, and until next time, stay safe. Bye for now.